Okay, I'm just going to play a little Britney to get us going. Hold on. All right. Yep, I mean, it's the greatest song of all time. Oh, Britney! You know that's Britney. She's unmistakable. She's such a icon. I have wanted from the very beginning to do podcasts about Britney. I also want to do podcasts about Cher and my all-time idol, Dolly Parton. And guess what? Today we are finally going to do a podcast that involves Britney Spears and a few other people. Why? Because I had a crazy idea. God, if this is the first podcast of Becoming You that you've ever listened to, you might think I'm off my rocker, but I'm asking those, stick with us, please. We're doing something a little different this time. Look, on the Becoming You podcast, we always talk about the same thing roughly, which is the pursuit of our purpose, figuring out what we were meant to do, finding the life we were meant to live. And the reason why we do that is because I teach a class called Becoming You at NYU Stern School of Business. It's based on the premise that your purpose lies at the intersection of your values, your aptitudes, and your interests. But look, I am just like you, a member of our culture and society, and I am always looking around and I am always spying other people, and in this case, celebrities, who I think would benefit from Becoming You. And yes, that's what we're doing on this episode of Becoming You. We are, and by we, I mean I am going to talk about 3 celebrities I think could really use Becoming You right this moment. And because this is such an unusual podcast for us, usually I'm much more lofty and serious, but because we're doing this wacky podcast, I have brought in help. I've got my producers here as always, but also some members of my own team to keep the guardrails on me as I start talking about Britney Spears and a few others, but also to ask the questions that you might be having yourself at home listening to me talk about celebrities doing Becoming You. So welcome to this highly unconventional episode of Becoming You. I'm so glad you're with us for the next 25 minutes or so as we do Becoming You with Britney Spears and others. All right, hello again. As I mentioned, this is Suzy Welch. I'm a professor at NYU Stern School of Business. I'm also, just to make sure you understand I'm a serious person, I'm the director of the Initiative on Purpose and Flourishing at NYU. This is an academic think tank that's devoted to people finding their authentic lives, both at home and at work. And therefore, I'm hoping to establish the fact that I am a serious person. I hope you are convinced. So we're going to do Becoming You with 3 celebrities who I think are in dire need of it. And the first one, as you know, because I started with mentioning her, was Britney Spears. I want to talk to you first, though, about my long relationship with Britney. Look, I'm not the only person in the world who's completely obsessed with her and who loves her, but I'm like one of those people. You remember that video long ago of Chris Crocker crying, saying, "Leave Britney alone"? I could have made that video. It now has 4 trillion views, where Britney was really being picked on in the press and the media, and one of her Uber fans got on. This is sort of dating me here, and he sobbed saying, "Leave Britney alone," and everybody made fun of him because he was so heartfelt. And I thought, why is everybody laughing about this? I feel like people should leave Britney alone. So I have been fascinated with Britney. One, her music's great, and for many, many, many years, I was a runner until I ran too much. And then my doctors all agreed that if I wanted to continue to walk into my dotage, I needed to stop running. But I loved her because I listened to her a lot running. She's the greatest running music. I know you could disagree with that. But actually, my interest in Britney started when Britney started to completely fall apart, because to me, from my vantage point as a person who thinks about how people achieve their authentic lives, I had a very quick diagnosis. Before people were even talking about it widely, I remember saying to my kids at dinner, "They're stealing that girl's life." And I felt strongly that her life was being stolen. And maybe I just empathized a lot, as a person who studies people who are trying to get to their authentic lives. I diagnosed immediately that this was a person who was fighting for her life. And people were speculating about drugs and boyfriend problems and everything. And I just remember feeling so strongly what's going on is that she's fighting for who she really is. And if you look at videos of Britney as a young woman, so behind the scenes directing dancers and talking to them about the music, and you've seen any of the documentaries about her, I've seen them all, you see that she was an incredibly talented young woman who was completely in control of her music and her dancing and her life. And then you see that slowly being taken away from her, and then in the terrible culmination with her being put into receivership, with her life being like she was a prisoner of her parents and others. And it took a while for people to kind of see her point of view. I mean, the public opinion about Britney really switched over from her being just a complete F up to her being a person who had been terribly, terribly abused and by people who said that they loved her when she came out of receivership. I read her memoir. Not a lot of people read it, but and she didn't write it. I would have given my right arm to be the ghostwriter on that because I would have loved to have heard the true story from her. But even with the ghostwriter and a lot of stuff left out of it, it is absolutely a heartbreaking memoir. She is getting back her life and now she needs to rebuild. And I actually had a tweet that said, let us all now avert our eyes while Britney has a nervous breakdown in public, which she has gone on to have. And I go back and forth following her and unfollowing her now because on her Instagram, if you do follow her, you kind of see a woman who is in a real mess. Have you all thought I've lost my mind with this? Let me just ask my peanut gallery. Is my obsession with Britney normal?
I think we've seen a lot of people obsessed with Britney.
Thank you. This is Maddie speaking. She's on my team.
Yes, hello. Yeah, I think we've seen the mass outpouring of love and obsession with Britney. So I don't think you're off the rocker here.
Okay, all right. Do you feel that way about her?
I do.
And she's from your state.
Exactly. She's like a small town Louisiana girl.
Yeah, you should relate. You're from Shreveport.
I really do. And like my grandmother growing up, instead of playing us like child-friendly things, would play Britney Spears music videos. So
I love your grandmother more every day. That's
very
fantastic.
strong connection.
All right. You know, we also have here from my team Lindsay, who's a young person. She's our summer intern, and I think you're 20. Are you 20?
Yes.
Do you know who Britney is even?
Yes. She's blonde.
Oh my God.
45.
Stop talking.
Wait,
okay.
Wait, I know who she is.
She's blonde and she's 45. Do you know?
And she sang "Hit Me, Baby, One More Time."
She did.
Yes. Okay. I can say that
okay.
much.
Okay. Elisa, you're slightly older. Do you know who she is? All right, and Eric, Eric is an oldster more like me, but
you always, whenever you talk to me, you always introduce me as an oldster. First
I know you're not that old, but
B,
you're not that much older than these young people.
Yes,
but.
In fact, I have the honor of being able to say that Britney Spears has always followed me on Twitter since she first started her account, and no one has any idea why.
I think it might have been a mistake.
Probably.
All right. Look, I have to tell one last Britney story before we do Becoming You with her. After the pandemic ended, I wanted to throw a party to thank my girlfriends who carried me on their shoulders and in their arms while my husband was dying. And this was a group of around 25 women. I'm so lucky to have these close girlfriends who really shoulder to shoulder with me as Jack was dying. And we had to wait till the pandemic was over. So I used the excuse of my birthday to have a birthday party where everybody came. I invited all my girlfriends for a weekend, and I just like pulled out all the stops, and there was going to be all sorts of, festivities. I got a yoga teacher to come in and do yoga with us and all these things. And all of the women that I invited, 25 women, all showed up, and we're going to have this spectacular weekend. Little did they know that I was plotting away. Of course, these being my closest girlfriends, they were fully aware of my obsession with Britney Spears, which they all were very sweet about. So there was one point on the first day, the party was 2.5 days, on the first day where we were all standing outside. It was a gorgeous September day, and after everybody, people gave toasts. It was very, very nice. But then I got up and I said, I really need to say something to everybody. And I got up and I gave this very meaningful, tearful toast. And I mentioned each person by name, and I talked about how they had helped me and what it had meant to me. And then I said, but there's one thing that I've never told any of you, and I think you're all here together. And so this is the moment that I need to tell you something that I've never been able to say to you. And exactly at that moment, I had it planned that through these very big loudspeakers, this beat dropped, and then at a distance, you saw who appeared to be Britney Spears walking towards you, and it went, "It's Britney, bitch!" And for about 15 seconds, all of my friends thought that I'd actually hired Britney Spears to come to my birthday party, and it was the greatest Britney Spears impersonator ever known to humankind. I found her in Vegas. We flew her out from Vegas, this poor woman, and she came down. She was coming quite a distance towards everybody, but the joy I felt, where for 15 seconds, I looked at my friends. They were all silent screaming, although I believe that my sister was actually literally screaming because they thought, she's lost her mind. She got Britney here. And so this incredible impersonator walks towards us while the speakers are blaring, "It's Britney, bitch." And then she got up on stage and I danced with her while she sang "It's Britney, bitch" the whole way through. And it was quite the day. We all posed with Britney later. And that's how much I love Britney. All right, that's my Britney story. Britney and Becoming You. Let's go there. So look, Becoming You is a methodology that helps you find your life or reclaim your life. And the reason why we have our lives taken away from us there are a lot of them. There are myriad. I mean, there's the 4 horsemen that I talk about all the time, the expedience and expectations and events. But Britney had nefarious things at work. I mean, she had people who wanted to profit off of her. And so let's just say her life was taken from her. Then she fought like hell to get it back. She did, God, she had both hands tied behind her back, but she, with the help of fans who really rallied around her, finally got her day in court, literally got her day in court, and she got her life back. And it's not been pretty since then. Let's not kid ourselves. And at first, everybody was kind of joyous, and it looked like she was going to have this wedding, this marriage that worked. But I think that she's not found her life yet. And so I would, Britney, are you listening, sister? I mean, if I could sit down with her, I would start with her values and I would find out what she really wanted. I mean, I think the thing that Britney has to figure out is where she is with that value of luminance. We have a lot of data on people who've taken the values bridge, and luminance is the fame value. It's the value where you say fame is important to me. I want to be famous. And actually, only 4% of all people have fame in their top 5 values. And I think Britney has to figure out where luminance shows up for her. Does she want to be a famous person? What's her relationship with fame? I'd love to actually have her figure that out. Does she want to just be a private person? She seems to have a tortured relationship with this value. I know she's tasted what's so great about it, and she has actually experienced what's so bad about it. She's just grew up in the public eye and people were cruel to her. But of course, sometimes fame really helps you. And so I think that that's the value that she needs to figure out. I think there's other values that Britney needs to wrap her head around. Probably the value of agency, which is how much we control the outcomes and decisions of our life, is one that her agency was taken away from her. How much does she want it back? If she doesn't want it back, who's going to have agency for her? I'd actually love to run down every single value with her. Let's talk about scope. Scope is the value about how big and exciting a life you want versus how small and controlled and predictable a life that you want. And I think Britney is an example of a person who on every single one of the values has a tortured relationship because she doesn't know who she is right now. And I think if that's you, and I hope it's not, but if it is, there are these values, and you can go down them one by one, or you can take the test and find out what you really believe of what your values really are. I think she needs to do that. I mean, team who's listening to this, do you feel me?
I'm less interested in her values than I am in understanding the aptitudes and the other components of becoming you.
Okay.
Because to me, when you talk about fame, that's tied to not only what you want from the world, but the world wants from you.
Well, if you don't want to be famous, it's pretty easy not to be famous. If you don't
Is it?
want to be,
If you don't want,
if she doesn't have to go perform, she lives in a cabin in Vermont. But let's talk about her aptitudes. Aptitudes is the second part of the Becoming You process. She has extraordinary aptitude. She's very gifted. People who are really good at sports and in performing, I mean, they tend to show their aptitudes very young, and she did. And she's got this extraordinary gift. It's a real question when you've got a gift, whether or not you give it to the world. I was speaking to a group the other day, and somebody raised their hand and he said, let's talk about aptitudes. My younger brother is extraordinarily good at soccer. He could be a phenom. He's so good at soccer. He doesn't like playing soccer. Should I force him? And I said, no. And he said he was expecting some kind of ambivalent answer, well, this, try this, try that. And I said, no, do not force somebody to use their gift if they don't want to. So she was kind of forced to deploy her gifts by her family that profited off of them. I think that you're right. The question is around aptitudes and whether or not she wants to bring her gifts to the world anymore. But that's related to her values. I don't think she knows the answer. I mean, she's putting herself out there dancing every day. She's a great dancer. But is it habit or is it choice?
I don't know if you remember when she did a residency in Las Vegas
Yeah.
for a number of years. So many people wrote about how it felt like she was just up on stage doing motions and things, that she wasn't really invested and engaged.
She was forced to do it. I mean, if you read her memoir, she was a prisoner in that time. They wouldn't let her out of her room. They would let her out and put her on the stage, and then she'd go through the motions and come out. It's agonizing. One of my great regrets is that I didn't see her in Vegas. Instead, I saw Celine Dion and had the uniquely unpleasant experience of my husband falling fast asleep during Celine Dion as we watched. That he, honest to God, woke up from a Celine Dion concert and said, who won? Because he likes sports. Okay, back to Britney Spears. Britney, we're going to wrap it up on you now because I got two other celebrities who need Becoming You. But I think that talk about a person who needs to get square with their values and their aptitudes are so obvious to the world. But what are you interested in doing? You could do almost anything and you could do almost nothing, but I'm rooting for you because I think you've been to hell and back and I just hope she gets healthy. All right, let's move on to my next celebrity on Celebrity Becoming You. You know it. Come on, you know that's White Lotus. Yeah, that's the theme song for White Lotus. You know you watched it. If you didn't, you heard everybody talking about it and you completely lost your mind. And the reason why I'm playing it is that our second Becoming You celebrity is Walton Goggins, who had a complete star turn, a tour de force as Rick in the third season of White Lotus. He played a very central character in it. And, you know, I have to be honest with you. I did not know who he was. I'd never seen him before as an actor. I watch a lot of TV and movies. My daughter is Sophia. Some of you may know her. She's been on the show as a casting director. And apparently he's been around for he's had a very, very long career as a very respected character actor, as he's been in a lot of different shows. Just not aware of him. Maybe seen him a dozen times because these character actors are very good and you just don't focus on them because you're looking at the big stars, but you could not miss him in White Lotus. So I became obsessed with him along with everybody else and I thought, God, that guy's fantastic looking. He's just playing such a complicated character. And I became curious about him and started looking up other stuff he was in and asking people about him. And everybody's, oh yeah, and it's particularly Sophia was like, Walton Goggins, Mom, everyone knows who he is in Hollywood. So anyway, Walton, it's time for Becoming You with you. Why? Because he has been this incredible character actor and built this incredible career in White Lotus. I mean, I think he was as surprised as anyone. He sort of broke through to kind of A-list outside of Hollywood fame with what happened with White Lotus. He got involved in a scandal afterwards involving his co-star in White Lotus and his wife, and everybody was talking about it on the gossip page. This is kind of new stuff for him outside of Hollywood. And then the other night, I was minding my own business, watching some TV, and I think I was watching one of the late night shows, and lo and behold, I see Walt Goggins in a television commercial for Walmart. And I don't know if I screamed, but I let out a little gasp like, Walt, what are you doing? And he was hawking for Walmart. And, you know, celebrities make money as they should when they can with all, you know, like Tom Cruise does ads for Target in Japan apparently, and there's all sorts of, I think Brad Pitt does the same thing, not typically in the United States, and we all understand and respect that they've got to make hay while the sun shines. But this was this moment where I thought, wait, what is Walt Goggins going to do? What is he going to do? Is he going to make a transition to being kind of a different kind of star? Is he going to build on the years and years? You know, it's very common that people become overnight successes after breaking their asses for 30 years. And I think that's what happened to Walt Goggins. And now he is out there doing some very commercial stuff that kind of makes you go, So Walt, we invite you on to Becoming You so that you can do Becoming You with us. But I think that this is a moment where he has to figure out how he wants to be in the public eye. Does he want to make hay while the sun shines and make the money he can make with his fame, which may or may not last? Or does he want to continue to be considered a very serious actor? And I think what he's gambling is that both are possible at the same time. I'm not so sure because you just don't see Meryl Streep hawking for Walmart, do you? I think he's at a real crossroads. Now the world is different than it was when Meryl Streep was, starting off her career as a very serious actress. But I don't know. So here are the values I'd like Walton to think about. Again, I think like Britney, how important is fame to him. But actually, I think the value that he's probably grappling with right now is affluence. And he's gone along, I'm just making a lot of presumptions here. He's gone along for quite some time in his career, being in a city where people have gobs and gobs and gobs of money, and he's been what's called a working actor. He has worked for his money. This is a kind of actor that, goes from job to job. He's like all people, again, a wild presumption, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think like a lot of people who are in Hollywood, he's living just a little bit outside his means. That's what happens when you're surrounded by people who have a lot more money than you. You get the house that's bigger than you can afford, and you get the car, or you do this and that because you want to kind of keep up with the Joneses. And suddenly he's getting offers for movie leads and so forth, and he's getting offers to do things like, God knows, Walmart came along with a bucket load of money, and they said, look at all this money. And he looked at that money, he said, look at all that money, and probably looked around at the people that he knew and loved, and he said, what do you think? So affluence is the value I think he's got to think about. And guess what? So do all of us. So do all of us. I mean, I think that one of the snarkiest, meanest things you can say to somebody is all you care about is money, right? Money is a value, and how much you want of it is something we test in the values bridges. I say to my students, I can't do the becoming you process with you unless you have a conversation, a candid conversation with yourself about how much money is enough. We judge people, and we judge people's attitudes about money all the time, don't we? I mean, let us just pay attention to our own values, shall we? And stop judging other people's values, like I'm judging Walton Goggins' values here today. But I would say that if I had Walton here, I would say, where are you on that affluence? Have you had that honest conversation with yourself about how much that value really matters to you? So that's the piece of work I would like to do with Walton. My friends here today, am I going hard on him? Am I okay?
I think it's interesting you bring up affluence because looking at his sort of like red carpet history, and I've watched all of his various home tours.
Yes.
I see a lot of beholderism.
Yeah.
So I do wonder if his high affluence is pushing his high beholderism up a bit.
Maddie, spoken as a true person who's sat in on every Becoming You class that's ever been taught.
Just a few.
I have watched his home tours also, and I have high beholderism, which is why I've watched them. He has a very interesting house. It's got all sorts of eclectic stuff. It's kind of goth. It's cool. And so he does have high beholderism, without a doubt, because he's really digging the home tours. And so maybe, indeed, his affluence is in pursuit of his extremely high value of beholderism. Walton, we're psyching you out here at the Becoming You podcast studio. So I think that, look, your values have interplay with each other. They do. Your work centrism may be a value that's living in service of your value of achievement. And your non-civvy may be a value that you're expressing. That's your value to help people, may be a value that's living in service of your radius, your desire to change the world. So I just say, look, he's doing great. I hope he's in something soon so I can watch him. And that is our second celebrity. Our third one, I'm going to be brief when I talk about him because he makes everybody's head explode. But right back after the break, we're going to talk about Elon Musk. All right, hi, this is Suzy Welch. This is Becoming You, celebrity version, all in service, though, of understanding the Becoming You methodology. All right, our last celebrity, I don't know, I think everybody's head will simultaneously explode. It's Elon Musk. He's super controversial. I totally understand it. I think that one of my podcast producers urged me not to do this, but I actually had a really interesting experience where I saw him speak live a year or something ago, and he is a very mysterious person. I'll put it that way, a very, very mysterious person. And I'm not going to opine in any way on politics. I mentioned Elon Musk because, first of all, we all know who he is. And I don't want to make light of it because what's going on in our government and our politics, very serious stuff. But I will say that he feels very confused to me. He feels like a person who's struggling to know what his identity is and what he's living for. He defined his identity as helping change the government. And he marched in and said, I'm going to take all the waste out and do that. And oops, he exited the White House stage left and had a big pouty fight in public with his boss. And I think he thought that the next 4 years of his life were going to be in government, and he lost his job and he can't figure out, am I in government or am I in business? And he's got shareholders who are saying, baby, come home to business because we need you because of the stock price and so forth. So I think he's trying to figure out if he's a businessman or a government crusader. We often dehumanize people like him, and maybe he's a case where that should happen, but I don't want to dehumanize the struggle I think I see him going through, which is to figure out what he was born for. That is the universal struggle, and that's why I mention him. I can't seriously sort of talk about what his values are. He's so unusual and so peculiar and so strange that it's hard to be serious in applying the Becoming You process to him, but I do want to talk about his central struggle, and I see it all the time. Look, sometimes people come into Becoming You, and they come into the process And they're a little bit like Max. If you will remember, he was in our 3-part series where I did Becoming You with Max and Kristen, 2 Becoming You alumni. And Max was trying to figure out whether or not he should be an entrepreneur or go into corporate America. Okay, and that I see a lot of people like that. I mean, I have people who do Becoming You who are working moms, and they're trying to figure out how much they should be working and how much they should be moms. Somebody I'm working with right now was just fired and had been in a job for 10 years that was sort of okay, kind of B plus, and now he's saying, okay, I want to have an A plus life. But I occasionally bump into people in Becoming You, and it's not just occasionally, more often than you would guess, and more often than I wish it were, for their sake. People come into Becoming You, and they are trying to figure out what they were born for, trying to figure out why they're here. And it's super existential. It scares me when that is the struggle, to be honest with you, as a person who does this, because I feel like I'm holding somebody's life in my hands. And the place I always start is, you were born for a reason, and it's so important that you're here. Let's just find out what it is. Let's find out. And you know what? I think that just like how Becoming You helps people with tweaks, Becoming You really helps people with the existential stuff. That's one of the reasons I love it. I think that if you are in an existential crisis, and I think that Elon Musk is, and the consequences of his existential crisis are very huge, but I think he is. If you're having it, Becoming You is there for you also. And I think it's pretty straightforward. You march through the steps. It starts with your values. What are they? And your aptitudes, and then your economically viable interests. It seems like a very practical tool, but it's also an existential tool, which is why I mentioned him, and I hope nobody's head truly did explode. Friends in the studio, questions or thoughts about what I'm saying?
I do.
We're going to hear from Lindsay.
So Elon Musk is very interesting in that I think he leans more heavily in towards his aptitudes rather than values. I don't think he really knows his values, but most people who take Becoming You usually lean more heavily into their values, like what they want to do. What do you think he values, or if anything?
Well, if you listen to him, as I did in that talk, he would tell you, and it may or may not be true, he values radius, number one. I mean, if you believe him, he's off the charts. Radius is the value about changing the world. And wanting systemic change. And if you look at Doge and even putting people up into space and Tesla, these are all things that you want to. When you have high radius, you want your name to be remembered. You want a legacy. You want people to know who you are.
I think it's fascinating. I think work centrism is clearly got to be his top value, if not his top value, because he always, even in talking about leaving government, going back into the private sector, he's saying, I'm back to sleeping at the factory, or I'm back to
he slept in the government offices. He definitely work centrism. I mean, although for a person who has work centrism as of top value, I'm going to say I think it's radius and then maybe work centrism, but as a person who has it as number one or number two, how he managed to have 14 children. He somehow fit in eudaimonia.
Yeah, well, but I think what Lindsay was talking about is really interesting, aptitudes, because as looking back on him, almost as long as he's been a public figure, he has not been a very compelling speaker or presenter of his ideas. No, he's very good with his ideas and putting, but like when going out on a stage and explaining what he's doing.
He's not a communicator. I mean, the guy's a genius. He must be. He's created these companies. Look, as a person who's trying to create a company, it's very hard to create a company, and he's obviously an idea generator of epic proportions, but. You're right, he's a terrible communicator. These are not his aptitudes, and maybe that's why he couldn't be in government. And maybe he couldn't play the game. Maybe that was part of it as well. Or maybe he just was with two crazy people who have trouble having bosses were in the same room together. Other questions or thoughts about this?
What do you think of his value of achievement? Because I feel like the fact that he's like managed to have a very successful business, but also seeing success could be important to him, because like...
For sure. He's definitely got achievement up there also. Achievement is the value of seeing success. You want people to look at you and say, my God, that person's successful. He wins at everything. And that is the value of achievement. Again, guilty as charged. I got that one too. And I remember, like, my sister, who was very low achievement, she's saying to me, me saying to her one day, she teaches yoga, how many people were at class? And she said, I just don't care, Suzy. Okay. And that is the difference between people with high achievement and people with low achievement. You know what? No better or worse. I actually felt kind of ashamed when she said that to me. I was like, why do I care so much? Anyway, but I do. Yes.
Real quickly, is there any connection between narcissistic tendencies and achievement?
bring that up with the therapist. I don't have any idea. I don't know. And this is my students are constantly asking me questions like that. And I say, I look, it's above my pay grade. I don't know. I don't know enough about narcissists. I mean, I think I know one when I see one, but don't we all? But I do think, God, I hope, and I'm pretty sure, you can have achievement as a top value and be a totally emotionally healthy person. I hope I'm an example of that. And, there's an Enneagram type called Achiever, and there's a healthy presentation of it. There's also a very unhealthy presentation of it. But when we judge each other's values, that's what we're doing. We're basically saying that value makes you sick. And that's what happens with work-centrism, right? And it can happen with achievement. And one of the crazy pieces of data that we are now seeing as we're gathering data at Becoming You Labs is that as a value, achievement is for Gen Z very low, and it's a negative variance, meaning they think there's still too much of it in their life. It's a low value and it's still too much in their lives. That's generational. Just fascinating. We'll be writing and talking about that when I find a spare moment. Anyway, I don't want to keep people longer than they can stand with this crazy celebrity episode here of Becoming You. Look, I don't know. We still talk about the important stuff. Let us know what you think about it. That is it for today. This is Becoming You, and I am Suzy Welch.